Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest episode of our entertainment show. As you know, each month we run a special series in part 3 of our show called Into the Vault series, where we look at classic TV series and movies throughout the decades, whether it's a 70s cowboy and Indian series with Clint Eastwood, maybe it's an 80s police detective show with Starsky and Hutch, maybe it's a 90s futuristic sort of a thriller in terms of Speed or RoboCop, or maybe then we're looking at it, maybe a 2000 romance story, like, or a Sleepless in Seattle, and maybe a 21st century, then maybe we're looking at a sci-fi futuristic horror story. But Into the Vault this week's series, we're going to go back to 2005. We're looking at an action police detective movie starring Ethan Hawke, Laurence Fishburne, Maria Bello, Gabriel Byrne, the one and only Irish actor Gabriel Byrne, John Leguizamo, and our special guest this evening. This guy, you might know him. He's appeared on Full Metal Jacket. He's appeared in Sudden Death alongside Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's voiced the famous gaming character Jax in Mortal Kombat, and he began his career back in 1975, appearing on a TV series called Swiss Family Robinson, playing the character Jema, which aired on October the 8th, 1975. The one and only, the Hollywood legend, Dorian Harewood. Dorian, congratulations first of all for such a career that has spanned over 40 to 50 years at the moment. And before we talk about Assault on Precinct 13, do you still remember Swiss Family Robinson?
I got to tell you, I'm really surprised and impressed that you have that down there, Jim. Yeah, that was my very first job in Hollywood. Actually, after coming from, I started in theater in New York, but my very first job out here in Hollywood was Swiss Family Robinson, and I played Jama, the escaped slave or something like that on Swiss Family Robinson, and the one of the regulars on that show was a young teenager named Helen Hunt. Who became a big Oscar winner.
Were you 19 or 20 at those back in that stage?
What year was that?
1975.
75. I was 25 years old.
25 years old.
Yeah,
25 years old.
And then I went on and did a couple other things right out there. My first film was Foster and Laurie. I was in the same year, 75, while I was out there. And I also did a movie that was a television movie with Perry King, and I also did a movie with Charlton Heston that same year called The Gray Lady Down. But that was all in 75 when I first came out to California.
Yeah, it's been a terrific career, Dorian, and it's still going very, very strong. I have to say, before we speak about Assault on Precinct 13, when I was a 10 or 11-year-old boy, one of the first action movies I ever saw was Sudden Death, and I was sort of blown away by it in terms of Jean-Claude Van Damme, in terms of the ice hockey ring. It's still probably one of the famous action movies, and I have to say you had a stellar, magnificent role in that movie as well.
Thank you.
Assault on Precinct 13. First of all, Dorian, this project, when you got involved, when you signed up for it, were you approached for this role, or did you have to audition for this role? And were you aware of some of the cast, some of the names that were assembled to this script when you signed on?
Well, fortunately, Jim, this was one of the movies where I was just offered the role, and I guess the director and some of the actors, the producers knew of my work, so they just offered me the role. It wasn't a very large part by any stretch, but so they offered it to me, and I saw who was in it, and I didn't know the director. I guess was it Francois Richet. I didn't know of him, but I guess he knew about my work, and they offered the thing. And working with people like Laurence Fishburne and Gabriel Byrne and Brian Dennehy and Ethan Hawke and all those people, Maria Bello and Drea de Matteo, there's a terrific cast, so it was very easy for me to accept the offer. And I was living in Canada at the time. I lived in Toronto for a few years, and we filmed this either in Toronto or Montreal. I can't remember, but it was in Canada that we filmed it.
And Dorian, obviously, I do believe there was an original of the movie that came out in 1976. So was this a sort of remake of that sort of classic in terms of that sort of twist to it? And had you actually seen the original movie yourself?
I had not seen it before they offered it to me, Jim. It was originally done by John Carpenter, the famous director, John Carpenter, who's still with us, by the way, thankfully. But I did take a look at it, and it was very well done. It was years before, so it was a different kind of technology and that kind of thing. But it was still suspenseful, and this was a very, very good remake of that particular original film.
And the character Gil, in terms of the police sort of security, what did the producers, script writers had in mind for this sort of character? What was your sort of take on him? Was the normal sort of working man, 9 to 5, went to work sort of family man, nothing sort of spectacular about him, a good, honest, hard labor, a good sort of grafter? Was that your initial sort of take on this character?
That was pretty much it, the situation, the character development, Jim. Most of the characters in this project, just as in the original, kind of got into this extremely extraordinary and dangerous situation where the precinct was already closed, almost closed down, and it was about to be shifted to another precinct. But for different reasons, fate brought all of these different characters together in this almost abandoned police precinct, and became very dangerous, obviously, in the original, and even in the one that we did, very, very dangerous. But people didn't know that this was going to be happening. It was just supposed to be a regular day. Ethan Hawke's character was the head of that particular precinct in that situation, and he was just there, and it was a regular day. My character was actually we were driving some convicts to another precinct, and because of the weather, we were diverted to this particular precinct. So we didn't even know we were going to end up at this precinct 13. So we got there, and then all hell broke loose. So it was very, very, very well written, a very good situation. But as far as the character, as you said before, just an ordinary guy, ordinary cop doing his job, and teleporting his or taking his prisoners to one precinct, being diverted to another, and then getting caught up in this whole kind of treacherous and murderous situation.
And Dorian, from an Irish aspect now, I know you've worked with so many actors and actresses throughout an illustrious career spanning over the decades. And had you worked with previous movies and TV series with Irish actors before, or was Gabriel Byrne the first Irish actor that you've ever worked beside?
I'm not certain that he was the first one, but he certainly was one of the best that I'd ever worked with. And unfortunately for me, I didn't really get a chance to work with him in the movie itself, but to be associated with him in the movie was something I'm very proud of. He's one of our finest actors. I've loved all of his work, and he did a great job in this as well. But I'd have to look at the movies I've done. I've been fortunate enough to have been in a bunch of different movies and a bunch of different plays, and I'd have to take a look to see if any of them were of Irish descent or definitely from Ireland. I'm sure there were some.
There were sure indeed. And Dorian, in terms of the working week on set, in terms of assault on precinct 13 and the shooting, during your time in Toronto and Canada when it was sort of shot, it was shot in Canada, Was it a long production? Can you remember? Was it 6 to 8 weeks? Were there long days for you on set, or did you have a sort of shorter time on set in terms of your role?
My role, even though it was a small part, the hours were long because the character, when he gets wounded, he's in with all the rest of the stars of the show, with Ethan Hawke and Maria Bello and Brian Dennehy and all of them within the precinct. So I had to be there for that entire time. So my days were long, but the shooting schedule for me was relatively short relative to the other stars, for sure.
And I suppose, Dorian, I don't have to say this to you. You've been in the business so long. You've seen so many titles of movies and remakes and redos that have promised so much that never lived up to expectation, and even they had glittering casts and they might have been seen as failures. Were you sort of optimistic when you saw the final production of Unsolved on Precinct 13 that it had met its expectations and it would be given sort of good reviews in terms of its surrounding, that it would capture public imagination? After being so long in the industry, do you get a good vibe or a feel? Are you a good person to get a grasp of these sort of things? Do you have a sort of sixth sense, dare I say?
Well, reading the script, Jim, I knew that it was going to be at least as good as the original. Like I said, the original was suspenseful, but it was pretty much kind of simplistic in its storytelling. This one had some nuances, more nuanced surprises, if you will, things that went on, and the different characters were a little more nuanced. So it was a very, very well written script, and to me, in tribute to the original, John Carpenter, who wrote and directed it and also did the theme song or the score for the original thing in '76. This much more than met the responsibility to take it to another level, and our cast and crew and the director and all involved with the project lifted the project to another level, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the critics and the public.
And Dorian, do you like playing these sort of roles? I mean, attached to movies where there's it sort of tells its story and it leaves the sort of audience guessing, and take that in contrast to Sudden Death, where it's all action and it's tense and you're going, it's adrenaline 100 miles an hour moment where you're going up against Jean-Claude Van Damme in terms of beat the clock, dare I say, which it was. Do you like do you like both in terms of a mix, or what's your sort of take? Do you like that sort of keep the audience guessing, dare I say, in terms of what Unsolved Precinct 13 does?
I think just as in Assault on Precinct, just as in Sudden Death, Assault on Precinct 13, they both had some kind of twists where people were surprised. I mean, in my character on Sudden Death, they were surprised to see that I was actually not who I was supposed to be, or who it seemed that my character was. And the same thing with Assault on Precinct 13. I think I'm not a writer, but I know that the top writers and screenwriters and novelists always go with something that can surprise, that keeps the audience a little bit on their toes and surprises them with twists and turns that are unexpected. And both of those projects, Sudden Death and Assault on Precinct 13, carried that surprising plot line through, where the audience was never really sure what was going to happen, and was genuinely surprised by some of the different turns of events. So I like those kinds of things.
And Dorian, we all know with sort of movies that are a hit, obviously it can lead to spin-offs, animated movies, animated series. It can lead to spin-off varieties of shows, and it could lead to an awful, and speaking of yourself, you've done numerous and wonderful works in terms of voiceover work as well. Do you
Thank
ever
you.
feel that if something came about in terms of an animated role, in terms of Assault in Precinct 13, or maybe a cartoon version in terms of a voiceover, would that be something you appeal to, or are you a type of an actor, once you're involved in a project and you've played a certain role in it, when there's a sort of reboot or remake, you think to yourself, well, I've already done that sort of character in terms of playing him on a real version, that to go back now would be sort of taking away from what I've given to him in the first time? Or do you see it as each project takes on its own different world?
I look at each project on a case-by-case basis. As an actor, I was talked into acting. I started as a singer, went to New York as a singer, and I got talked into acting by the late, great Betty Davis, the great
Wow.
the actress
Wow.
Betty Davis. We did a project together. And she always told me, she said she really liked my dramatic instinct and she wanted me to at least explore acting. We had done this musical and she said, you know, once this musical's over, you should really look into acting because I like your instincts. But she always told me, she said, just let everything come as it will and let it deal with it on a case-by-case basis. Don't prejudge anything. Just look at things as an audience would. If it's good, it's something that interests you, do it. Not necessarily, don't, you know, just give everything a chance, basically is what she was saying as an actor. And she was an actor, a terrific actor all her life. I was just starting. She just talked me into it. But she said, you know, as you get into the acting world, don't turn away from something just because you think it may not be what you want. Take a look at it, give it a chance. Then if you don't want to do it, don't do it, but give it a chance first. And that's what I've always done. And sometimes to the unfortunate maybe consequence of maybe missing something that I would have been available for, because I've worked so steadily over the years. One of my producers, one of my first producers said, activity breeds activity. He said, you should definitely keep working. You're going to work a lot in your career. And this was the producer of my first film, Foster and Laurie. And he said, as long as you continue to take work, you're going to continue to work because of how good you are. He was telling me, he said, you really have good instincts to do it. He said, don't turn down something. Don't wait for that once in a lifetime role, because if you do, you'll probably just work once in your lifetime. So I took his advice, and I took a lot of jobs, some of which maybe I shouldn't have taken, but 99.9% of the roles that I've taken, I haven't regretted taking. But definitely some of the roles have taken me out of the running for some roles that I could have done and possibly would have done that may have been even better for me. But I don't have regrets about that because I was able to work as an actor. I've been a working actor since 75 and I'm still doing it. So I have nothing to complain about. And I'm glad that Betty Davis, as my mentor, taught me to check out each project individually, independently, on its own, and to take it on its own merits. And that's the way I've always done it. And that's the way I will do it, no matter whether it's a movie, theater project, animation, commercial, any of those kinds of things. John Schlesinger, with whom I also worked on two projects, Falcon and the Snowman and Pacific Heights. I worked with John Schlesinger, a terrific director. He also told me, he said, look, a lot of these people will look down on commercials or this and that, but what you want to do is whatever you're doing, just make it the best you can make it, if it's something you're interested in. Because he said, I was doing television commercials. I was doing, close-ups of a beer can or something, but I did my best work doing that. And then he went on to win the Oscar for Midnight Cowboy, directing Midnight Cowboy with John Voight and all those terrific, Dustin Hoffman, all those people. So I've gotten terrific advice from some of the tops in the field And the general consensus for me is take each project independently and do it if it's something that interests you and if it's something that you actually want to do. But don't judge it before you actually take a look at it.
And Dorian, lastly, before we finish up, it's about right we enlighten all our audience in terms of your activities in terms of 2023, and singing is definitely on the cards, and it's a deep passion from Dorian Harewood. I've spoken to many actors that have worked in the 70s and the 80s, like Tom Wopat, John Schneider, Robert Davi, Kiefer Sutherland, all these musicians at heart, musicians are first love. They got into acting, but they started off as musicians, and they got back to the musicians later on in their life, when the acting bug had left. And I do believe that's something that you like Robert Davi now is doing. He's a massive Sinatra fan. You're pursuing your own type of music. You might enlighten our audience about that for the final minute or two.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I mean, my first love is music. And real briefly, I started out as a singer. I went to New York as a singer. And then, like I said, I got talked into acting by Bette Davis. But I'm getting back into doing more singing. At a certain point, I opened for Gladys Knight. In fact, I was in Scotland. That's the closest I got to Ireland. I opened for the Four Tops. I toured with the Four Tops in England and Scotland back in '89, I think it was. I had done a CD. And they heard me. They didn't know that I was a singer. Most people don't know that I'm a singer. So now it's kind of almost like reinventing myself to the fans that know me as an actor. I'm now going to introduce myself as a singer, and because that is my first love. And fortunately for me, I've been able to have a very good response to my singing. My voice is trying to get my voice back in shape. I'm a little older than I was way back then, so it is a muscle. And but I'm very encouraged by what's happening, and I look forward to this new area and reconnecting to my first love, which is music. And I'll be singing here and nationally and internationally, and I'll probably get to Ireland as well, because I will be singing all over the world.
I'll definitely have a front seat there, anyway, Dorian Harewood, to watch that in person. But for the moment, Dorian Harewood, obviously Sudden Death, Full Metal Jacket, Seventh Heaven. But this week's episode, it was all about Into the Vault, was all about Assault on Precinct 13. You played the character Gil alongside Ethan Hawke, Laurence Fishburne, Gabriel Byrne, Maria Bello, John Leguizamo, and Ja Rule. Thanks for sharing your memories. It started off in 1975. No doubt in 2025, it's still going to be going as strong as ever. And Dorian Harewood, for me, Jim Conlan, an absolute pleasure. As I said, as a child, I loved your performance in Sudden Death alongside Jean-Claude Van Damme. Pleasure for me to speak to you on the airwaves this evening. Stay safe. Take care, Dorian, and hopefully, please God, we may speak to each other sometime in the near future again. Fantastic conversation.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much, Jim.